commentary on the Voyage of the Dawn Treader film is now as long as the film itself. But what can I say? I'm a geek, you know, love this stuff. My last video I left off, Eustace had just been dragoned. Then we get big time cut to later that night, and they've got a campfire, and Caspian's looking up at the sky, and there's an acknowledgement that, hey, these stars look different. You'll see these stars from Narnia. Like that acknowledgement there. The acting in the scene's a little cheesy, but especially on Skander's part. But this scene's nice because I like the idea of the scene at least, because you have Caspian looking up and saying, "Oh, I always imagined, you know, sailing to the world's end, finding my father." At last, sort of an acknowledgement from Caspian that going to the world's end is cool. You know, it's something that he really wants to do. Maybe a sense of longing, you know, a sense of anticipation over what we're gonna find. You know, now there's no mention of Aslan's country, unfortunately. Aslan's country at this point in the film has only been mentioned once. Reepicheep mentioned it briefly, you know, before they got to the Lone Islands, where that's kind of the emotional core of the book. They've only mentioned it once so far in the movie, but at least here Caspian's saying, "Oh, the world's end, wouldn't that be amazing?" You know, it's something. It's not much, but it's something. Edmund's like, "Oh, maybe you will." Edmund kind of seems like, "Oh, please go to bed." You know, just something about Skander's performance I didn't really go for. Nonetheless, kind of like the idea of the scene. A rare moment of getting some anticipation over the world's end. The movie really needs more of that. Then we cut to the MLG, Gale, saying, "I miss my mummy."
I miss my mummy. You just have to have faith about these things.
This is a theme in Prince Caspian too, you know, kind of having hope and hopelessness. But in Prince Caspian, there's no need for the characters to actually come out and say, "Oh, we must have faith in Aslan." You know, that just comes through in the story. I always feel like analyzing this film, talking about this film, has forced me to go back to filmmaking 101. Let's go back to basics. You know, you should try to tell your story visually. Why? Well, I get a greater sense of realism when you do that. In real life, people don't turn to you and tell you exactly what they're struggling with, exactly what they're feeling. You know, you have to watch them, observe them, and you'll come to understand it. We also become involved in the process if we're kind of inferring things that aren't necessarily said. I infer what Peter is feeling in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Peter never has to say, "Oh, I'm just so struggling to live up to my responsibility as kind of the father figure of this family." And when Edmund dies, it's not like, you know, I kind of talked about this before. We're just watching him run towards the witch, and we just totally know what he's feeling because we're emotionally connecting with him. When you just tell me everything that's going on, I don't feel like I'm connecting with you. "Oh, thank you, Bob and Larry. You just told me everything here's what we've learned today," you know? So this is certainly not the first time or the last time that the film completely abandons subtlety and just takes the easy way out. But again, going back to filmmaking 101, you should try to tell your story visually as much as possible. Themes of faith and finding hope and hopelessness are explored in Prince Caspian, but much more subtly done and much more interesting for that reason. So all this nonsense of Gale sitting there, "I miss my mummy," and Lucy like, "No, I gotta have faith about these things," blah blah blah. You know, I thought that was very, very poorly written. That was another really, really cheesy dialogue scene. Then we have kind of a nice scene of Reepicheep and Dragon Eustace kind of bonding. And Dragon Eustace is crying, and Reepicheep comes over, and he has a couple of good lines. He says, "I'll wager you didn't even believe in dragons this morning." I like that line, and Eustace doesn't really think it's funny. I like that. They do have a line I really didn't like. I already talked about this before in an earlier video about Reepicheep says, "Extraordinary things only happen to extraordinary people." Seems to fly totally in the face of everything that's in the books, and even the first two movies. You know, I get the four Pevensies are ordinary people, not extraordinary at all, and yet they're able to do extraordinary things. You know, extraordinary things do happen to ordinary people. You know, and so I don't know what Reepicheep is getting at here. But then I like how he's like, "Oh, start telling the story of another dragon. Oh, much fiercer than you." That was kind of funny. So this was a nice scene. Animation of the dragon was pretty decent too, I thought. Next morning they wake up and Gale sees the blue star they're supposed to be looking for. I'm not sure why they couldn't see the star at nighttime, but they can see it in the daytime. I think that'd be the opposite. I think that's really weird. But anyway, so another big cut. They're going on, and Lucy is standing on the back of the ship, and she's looking at the water, and she sees this water nymph. Oh, waves to it again, but this time the water nymph is like, "Get out of here! You're screwed. This place is evil. Run away!" And Lucy's kind of like, "Oh snap." I mentioned this little moment because this is a rare moment where they're actually trying to build some suspense, rather than just plowing onto the story. Here's a rare moment where they're trying to do it right, where they're actually going to say, "Hey, let's build a little bit of, let's make the audience go, wait, why is the water nymph telling him to turn back? Oh, is there danger here? What are we gonna find? That was kind of a nice touch. Then you show there's a few seconds of showing the crew. Oh, they're struggling to row and they're not getting any wind. And they're like, "Well, I'm gonna eat the dragon if I get any hungrier." It's okay. There's a food problem. Unfortunately, they're only. I'm only just starting to go. Oh wow, they're in trouble here, before they find a solution. Eustace, who's flying along. We'll talk about it in a second. Eustace is flying along, keeping up with them, then starts dragging the ship. To me, it's like, okay, I'm only just barely starting to get worried about this, and then they solve it immediately. Okay, here's the problem, and then there's the solution. So there's no power to it at all. If they'd spent in the book, where there's that long stretch where Lewis spends time saying, "Oh, they're starving and they don't know what to do," and you start going, "Man, how are they gonna get out of this? What are they gonna do?" And then they find the island, just in time. You're like, "Phew, that was a close one." Here, problem, solution, instantly. So there's not really any kind of suspense that results. Also, Eustace flying along, keeping up with them by flying all the way, and then even dragging them along. Lewis had the brains to realize that was. I know it's a fairy tale, but even I'm watching that going, he's gonna fly all the way across this ocean. I'm not buying it. And then pulling them along, I thought that was totally impractical. I know it's a fairy tale, but even that, I thought they were stretching it. Lewis even says in the book, basically hinting, that they wouldn't have been able to keep up with them by flying. This is also an important point. I didn't find Eustace's kind of transformation. I mean, his internal transformation is powerful here. I think it's because in the book, Eustace becomes a dragon, and this is when he starts realizing that he's not such a wonderful person as he always thought, that he's a nuisance. He's a dragon, and now he's a problem for them. Yeah, he does in fact help them out, and that this is kind of in the spirit of that, of him helping them out. I'm not sure why. I think he still wouldn't like him. But and the book talks about the experience of liking people and being liked was a new thing for Eustace. And but the fact is, they're like, what are we gonna do with our dragon? And he's a problem for them. Oh, we got to figure out what to do with this, dragon. He can't keep up by flying. How are we gonna feed him? And Eustace realizes he's a total nuisance. You don't really get that sense as much in the movie. Being a dragon, it's nothing but a help for the crew. And he's just like, yeah, I'm a dragon, I'm cool. So being a dragon is not much of a handicap or a problem for Eustace or even the crew. So I didn't get the power of Eustace realizing, oh, I'm not such a cool person. I'm actually he realizes who we all know he is, but he doesn't because he's so blinded with pride. But so I didn't really like that. I didn't think that was terribly well handled. And then, of course, they find Ramandus Island. They come to it, and there's what's come to be called the 10-second scene, where we randomly cut to Caspian holding a sword, and he's like, we can't even be sure the others made it to Ramandus Island. It's completely out of nowhere. I can think of 10 other... It's like, okay, we're here, and then it's like, oh, let's take a commercial break, and it's like they couldn't think of another way to convey to the audience, hey, they don't even know if the Lords made it here or not. Oh, let's just have Caspian say it right here, because we forgot to mention it. I can think of about 10 other places you could have put that scene, but it's kind of shoehorned into here randomly. It's really weird. They're almost to the island, and there's this sort of, oh, what are they going to find? Then all of a sudden, Caspian, big close-up, we can't even be sure the others made it to Ramandus Island. Really, really poorly written here. It just pulls me out of the movie. Then they get to the island, and it's really kind of fakey set design. Even the sound effects sound like they were pulled out of... I think I've heard some of those online before somewhere. They sound like they were pulled from like a sound effects library or something. Just, cliched, sort of generic jungle noises. There is kind of an eerie mood nonetheless. I like, the way it looks and everything. And they get to the table, and the way they find the Seven Lords is kind of creepy. Totally unnecessary to have the big musical done, when it shows them. It's like, it's creepy enough without the need for that. Come on, less is more, guys. And then Argos breathing on Lucy's kind of creepy, that whole thing. And then you have Edmund saying, hey, it's the stone knife. Which, if you haven't read the book, is like, what's the stone knife? Does that matter? And Edmund didn't even see never even saw the stone knife, so I'm not even sure how you know what it looked like. And once again, Caspian, not at all interested in the Seven Lords themselves, even though they're still alive and they could be saved. It's just like, their swords, there's their swords, get their swords. They don't care about the Lords, they just want their swords, something they need. Oh, we need those. I thought that was... This, again, I mentioned that several times. That really is a problem for me. They care more about their swords than the Lords themselves. The swords, they put them all together, and apparently it acts as some kind of signal to Liliendel, I suppose, Ramandu's daughter. And she comes down, and just as all Narnia fans fear this, they've completely cut out all that stuff about being a star at rest, and how Ramandu, getting younger and younger than becoming a star again. A lot more interesting, this sort of beaming down teleportation thing. I think it's pretty cheesy. And they have that cheesy part where Ramandu's daughter is like, if it's a distraction for you, I can change form. No, Edmund and Caspian acting like middle schoolers again. They also have the reason that the lords are asleep is different. In the book, it's because the knife is a thing that's not meant for them to touch, which to me just gave the knife, the idea of it, a lot more depth. And it's so much more interesting that this is a thing that is so sacred and powerful and magical. It is a thing not right for them to touch. They were just overwhelmed and fell into a sleep. Here it says, violence is forbidden at Aslan's table. I just thought that was kind of cheesy and weak and shallow. Ramandu's daughter is kind of glowing. I thought the glow, a subtle blue glow, might have been nice, but I thought this was over exaggerated. It's added to the digital fakey look of the whole thing. And of course, she does say the lords are going to wake when all is put right. And then she takes them up to where they can see Dark Island, not the Dark Island, just Dark Island, kind of cheesy. It says, Koryakin told you of the darkness. I'm just not sure how Koryakin knew about all that. But the last sword is in there. Of course it is, conveniently enough. Then we cut to, they're on the water. They're going towards Dark Island. I can't remember exactly which scene comes first, but I think that we show Reepicheep and Eustace flying towards Dark Island, and Eustace gets scared and wants to go away. I think he's a total coward. And Reepicheep has to, talk him into turning around. I guess they're assuming that he'll be of some use in there, I suppose, is what they're assuming. Then we have, they're on the edge of, instead of the Dark Island, they change it to just Dark Island, whatever. And then we have another super cheesy dialogue. I couldn't believe this when I was watching it. There were definitely a few. There are a handful of really cheesy scenes in this movie that kind of make me just chuckle a little bit. This is the scene where I almost fell out of my chair laughing in the theater. They're on the edge of the Dark Island, and they're about to go in, and they're like, "What do you think is in there? Our darkest nightmares, our darkest wishes." Pure evil. I mean, I think in my head, I'm just kind of imagining somebody going, our darkest nightmares, our darkest dreams, pure evil. I mean, like, it doesn't get much cheesier than that. I mean, wow. This has already established itself as the least subtle Narnia film, one of the least subtle films I've seen in a while, actually. Wow. That was pretty, it's downright pathetic, No one should look at something evil in the movie and go, pure evil, and actually be serious. That they just shouldn't do that, okay? I was just like, that's where I really just started laughing out loud in the theater. I couldn't believe. It's like, there must have been people on set who were like, this is crazy, don't do this. Like, I'm just kind of watching it going, couldn't somebody have done something? It amazes me the actors could keep a straight face and say those lines. Then out of absolutely nowhere, another totally random scene shoehorned into the movie. There's a scene where Lucy, they're down below. For some reason, they brought Gail with them. I can't imagine why. I'm not sure what you still think she'll be. But Gail's like talking to Lucy, and she's like, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. And she's like, I want you to be just like you. Why is this there? Why do we need this in the movie, or at least right here? We're about to go to the Dark Island, and we randomly cut to a scene where she's like, I want to be just like you. I don't know why that scene is there. This is one of the most poorly edited kind of parts of the movie, where you feel like they had all these scenes left over, so it's like, oh, let's just throw it in here. The whole movie is made with, it's directed with apathy, I've said. And they have Caspian like, Caspian tells Edmund, I want you to know, Edmund, you're like a brother to me, which is kind of cheesy. I don't think they've earned it at all, their relationship in the movie. And Edmund's like, me too. It's like, oh, I'm like a brother to me too. It's, again, you're like, you get the feeling that they weren't really thinking when they were writing this. So now I've still got the speech to talk about, but they're just about to go to the Dark Island. I will continue that in the next video.